Hi, everybody. In this lecture, we're going to talk about understanding academic standing. And before we get into that, just a couple things about academic probation. The important things are to not panic. It happens to a lot of students. It happened to me after my first semester. I had a 1.6. You can certainly recover, but it's important to know don't go it alone, right? Use your resources. That's one of the most common mistakes made by students is that they don't share their stresses of doing poorly with friends, family members, or people on campus. There's lots of people out there to help you. Remember that it's not permanent, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Talk to your academic advisor. Talk to me. I'm an academic advisor on campus, and one thing that we'll do is we'll check out the math, right, in what you might need to get yourself back in good standing. So those are the important things, and be honest with yourself. That's an important piece too. But so, getting into understanding academic standing, I put up here the UW regulation 6715, talking about scholastic probation, suspension, reinstatement, and academic renewal for undergraduates. We're going to refer back to this a lot. This is the law on campus that kind of governs this whole business of academic probation. So with that, there's three categories that you can be in depending on how your grades are. If you find yourself in this class, you're in category number 2 at the moment, right? You're on academic probation. Category 1, right? Good standing. And those, we'll get into that a little more, but students who achieve a grade point average of a 2.0 or better are considered to be in good academic standing. Students who get a grade point average below a 2.0 are on academic probation. And then the third category, which is a little ugly and people don't like to talk about it, but we need to understand it, is academic suspension. And so we'll kind of outline these three categories. So you find yourself on academic probation right over winter break. You get a letter from the university talking to you about it. And really, there's going to be 3 possible outcomes at the end of this spring semester. You can find yourself in good standing, right? So that means that your semester GPA this spring is above a 2.0. And it's high enough that it brings your cumulative grade point average above a 2.0. And so if that happens, if both those things, if your grades are good enough to bring your grade point average up above a 2.0, then you're back in the green, right? You're in good standing. And I guess it's important to say semester GPA, those are your grades for the semester classes. And then cumulative, that's your running total, right? So as a freshman, it would be your fall plus your spring. And we'll get more into that in a minute. The second outcome is continued probation. This is a very real possibility for a lot of students, depending on how poorly you did in the fall. If you're below a 2.0, but you're at a 1.8, then good standing might be a very real possibility. However, if you didn't do very well and you find yourself with a 0.7 or a 1.0 even, it's going to be really hard to get that cumulative grade point average up above a 2.0. And so here's where continued probation comes in. If your semester grades for the spring are above or at a 2.0, but they're not quite good enough, or let's say your fall GPA was so low that your cumulative GPA is still below a 2.0. Then you're placed on continued probation. Really, in the eyes of the university, they say, hey, you're on the right track. Although you're not above the 2.0 yet, you're working your way there, right? For example, in the fall, I get a 1.0, and then in the spring, I get a 2.5. If I figure those out together for my cumulative grade point average, I'd probably be around a 1.8. So I'm still on probation, but they say, hey, this guy's doing okay. And so I can continue to go to school. I can continue to be on probation. The third possible outcome is academic suspension. And so this happens when your semester GPA is below a 2.0 after you've already been on probation, right? So your semester GPA is below a 2.0 and your cumulative is below a 2.0. So let's say last semester I got a 1.5, and then this next semester I get a 1.5 again. I'm going to be suspended from the university at the end of the spring term. So those are the three possible outcomes. It's important to kind of understand this because we're going to set some goals on what we hope to achieve. We're also going to do some GPA calculation and figuring out what you need to get back to good standing, if it's possible, or if continued probation should be a more realistic goal. Definitely suspension is never the goal, but it's important to understand how it works to be able to avoid it. So let's talk just a second about academic probation and get into the details. And so we have there a quote specifically from that UNIREG, the 6715, right? The one that deals with suspension and probation and academic standing. A student shall be removed from academic probation at the end of the term in which his or her cumulative grade point average is above a 2.0, right? So that's kind of what we outlined on the previous slide. A really important point here, right? If you're on probation and you withdraw from all your classes, then you're still suspended. So although you don't have a bad GPA, you don't have a GPA, but the university recognizes that as not completing the semester, and so you still get suspended. So that's an important piece. You can withdraw from one class, maybe two, but you can't withdraw from all of them. And we'll talk a little bit more about withdrawing in a moment. Another thing that's important, right? You're on academic probation. It's not quite the end of the world. The sky's not falling yet. You have a chance to recover. And so there's no restrictions. You can register for classes. You can do everything that you need to be a student. It's just the university's way of kind of saying, hey, you got to make some changes. You're not quite on the right track. So here's just a couple details about suspension, and if you are suspended, you do have an opportunity to be reinstated to the university. So there's a quote up there again from the UNIREG, which really boils down to if you get suspended, you have to sit out for at least one semester, and that does not include summer, right? So for example, if I get suspended at the end of the spring, I cannot take classes at UW in the fall. I have to wait and then try to be reinstated for the following spring. The reinstatement process we'll talk about a little bit more later in the semester, but it is important to know you have to petition to be reinstated. It's not automatic. You have to meet with a committee and kind of discuss what has happened in your life and how you've come to reevaluate your goals and you're ready to be a student. And so we need to talk just a second about retaking courses. Some of you may be retaking a class this spring that you didn't do very well in the fall. It's a great opportunity. UW has a very generous retake policy. UW recognizes your most recent attempt. And so I put an example up there, right? If I failed my freshman English class, English 1010, and I retake it in the spring and I get a B, although the F will always be on my transcript, right? If I look at my transcript for the fall 2015, it'll always say English 1010 F. However, if I take it in the spring and it says it again and it says a B, as far as GPA calculations concerned, the F is excluded and the B is included. And so that's a really quick way, right? That takes a 0.0 for the F and brings it way up to a 3.0 for the B. And so that's a big deal. It's a great way to increase your GPA quickly. And so then we want to talk a little bit about dropping versus withdrawing. And it's important to understand the difference in the language, especially as far as kind of rules and regulations go. I hear a lot of students talk about, oh yeah, I dropped that class, when in all actuality they withdrew from the class. So dropping happens within the first 10 days of class. You're not charged for the class. It doesn't show up on your transcript. And an important piece is that it doesn't count as attempted hours, right? There's no record of you taking that class. It's as if you were never in it. Withdrawing happens after that 10th class day. So for this spring, the drop deadline is February 3rd. And so if you get out of a class before February 3rd, you drop it on your drop ad page, it's gone. But if after February 3rd, then you have to withdraw from the class. And there's some big differences there. One, you're going to be charged for it, right? You have to pay for that class. There is a refund schedule depending on when you withdraw from it, but you're only going to get, at the most, 50% of the money back. If you wait, and with every week, you get less and less money back. The class will be listed on your transcript, and the grade will show as a W. Maybe some of you withdrew from some classes last fall. We'll look at our transcripts throughout this class so you kind of understand how that looks. And then the course does count as attempted, but not completed. And so it impacts what we call your completion percentage. And so we'll get into that, but that does have bearing on financial aid. So it doesn't mess with your grade point average. So sometimes it's the right move, right? If you know you're not going to pass a class, if you're going to fail it, maybe withdrawing from it is the right thing to save your GPA. However, it does tend to hurt your completion percentage. So there's lots of moving parts, lots of reasons to use your resources and with your advisor, stop by the Center for Advising and Career Services and talk to an advisor and get as much info as you can. So those are the nuts and bolts about understanding your academic standing. Hope you enjoyed it, and check out the other lectures.